Now, when all of them, both those who visibly appear in their revolutions, as well as those other gods who are of a more retiring nature, had come into being, the creator of the universe addressed them in these words: "Gods, children of gods, who are my works, and of whom I am the artificer and father, my creations are indissoluble if so I will. All that is bound may be undone, but only an evil being would wish to undo that which is harmonious and happy." Salutations! By Jove, we've finally come full circle. After descending from that which a monolater would call God, we now rise back up to reveal that to which the philosophers gave such a title.
We're bringing God back in!
The English word God is derived from the same root as gout, meaning to pour out a liquid. Literally, it means any being to which offerings or libations are poured, and by extension, any entity which is the object of worship. Literally anything could potentially be called a god by this measure, so it's time to get technical. In the last video, we defined the nature of daemons, including benevolent eudaimons. An extremely powerful eudaimon may be worthy of being called a god, indeed to venerate such a being cannot be faulted, but this is not even close to a full understanding of the origin and nature of divinity. The traditional Greek word for god is theos. This is related to the word deus, referring to the sky father and luminous heaven. It's where we get words like theology and theism from. Plato attributed a very specific meaning to the word theos, which the late Neoplatonists replaced with the word henad in order to differentiate the theoi from the Christian concept of God, which is called theos in Greek. In Symposium, Plato explains that Eros, or Cupid, is not one of the theoi because he embodies desires and is subject to change, meaning he belongs in the sphere of generation and is a daimon. The henads belong in the intellectual sphere and are thus changeless and holistic. So, when we hear the word God being used by a Platonist, we know that they are talking specifically about things relating to the henads. So, what exactly is a henad? Let's ask Plotinus. Each god is all the gods coming together into one. Wait, what? This doesn't really mean anything on its own, and Plotinus makes no attempt in his surviving works to define the nature of divinity, so let's try asking Proclus, who first coined the term henad. Proposition 114. Every god is a self-perfect unity, and every self-perfect unity is a god. Now we're getting somewhere. Here we see that the definitive trait of the henads is fullness of individuation. This means that each henad is fundamentally separate from everything else that exists, including the other henads, and that they share no universals between them. This means that they are either prior to or coexistent with the nous, and they are rooted directly in the monad itself. Because of this, their only defining trait is a subordinate sort of oneness. Unlike the holistic oneness of the monad, which relates only to itself, the oneness of each henad is contrasted against the other henads.
These are all just random sentences, folks.
But doesn't this contradict Plotinus? Actually, no. Because the henads exist as separate things only due to the individuality being inherent in their nature, they are all composed of exactly the same energy in exactly the same proportions, but each possesses this same energy in a different mode. The henadic Jove contains the whole divine energy jovially, the henadic Saturn contains the whole divine energy saturnically, the henadic Mars contains the whole divine energy martially, and so on. Each henad stands at the top of a causal chain. If you think back to our video about the monad, you will remember that all change and motion is the result of a prior causal motion forming a series, at the absolute base of which lies the monad. The point at which each chain of causation contacts the monad is one of the henads. These chains are called serai. The serai pass through the nous and the anima mundi into the sphere of generation. At each level, they remain distinct from each other, though they may commingle as parts of a composite whole like atoms making up a body, they are still separate things. This is the origin of particulars. This is why there are many different squares instead of one perfect square. This is why there are many different planets, trees, clouds, and human beings. And it is why all of the naturally evolved religions on Earth are polytheistic, attributing different domains to different gods. If you want to hear more about the henads, I've left a link in the description to a podcast with an actual professional philosopher who can illuminate the topic with much more clarity than I. You may be forgiven to think, if the Henads are so boundlessly distant from man, and moreover are not susceptible to change or motion in themselves, in what sense can they be considered gods to whom prayers ought to be directed?
I've already summoned the gods.
The answer lies in the Serai. A Seira is not just a line of pre-existing dominoes that a Henad topples over, it is an unfolding of the inner energy of the Henad outwards, a manifestation of sublime power in itself. First, at the level of the nous, the Seira passes through a phase of divine intellect. Iamblichus refers to these as angels. Next, at the level of anima, it disperses into motive energy of a particular type, having a specific cosmic function.
I have the strength of thousands, for the Spirit of God is with me.
After this, it enters into the sphere of generation, manifesting in daimonia. Finally, it comes to rest in physical objects and phenomena, which are consequently regarded as sacred or holy. Revisiting the spring analogy given by Plotinus, we can say that the Henads are the points at which the spring ends and the rivers begin, pouring out their own particular essence. Rooted firmly in the infinite monad, the Henads are not depleted or reduced in any way by their output, but can rightly be called immortal and omnipotent. Therefore, when a person invokes a specific deity, they are not only invoking the Henad itself, but a particular Seira. A heathen may say that a certain idol or sacred tree or a great thunderstorm is Thor.
They worship him as a god. They want to put up a statue to him.
That a hammer-wielding spirit being is Thor. That the principal energy of overwhelming force is Thor. That a divine and disembodied mind is Thor. Or that the ultimate origin of all Thor-related particulars is Thor. To some degree, all of these statements would be correct, because all of these are levels of an unfolding Seira that stems from a Henad, which may be called Thor.
Oh, I think Thor is fabulous.
Perhaps you have also forgotten that at the core of your being lies the logistikon, a fragment of the nous, which lies just below the monad in the hierarchy of existence. You are separate from the other beings by virtue of the particularity of your logistikon, and thus your individual identity is caused by first contact with one or more of the Serai. It must be stressed, however, that none of the subsequent manifestations along the Serai are one with the Henads, and it is only by association that they may be called gods. One may say, this idol is Thor, only in the same sense that one may say, the sun is in my eyes.
You have been supplied with a false idol.
Iamblichus stresses that while the Serai are filled with the externalized essence of the Henads, they are not united with the Henads in any way. A divine nature, therefore, whether it is allotted certain parts of the universe such as heaven or earth, or sacred cities and regions, or certain groves or sacred statues, externally illuminates all these, in the same manner as the sun externally irradiates all things with its rays. I have left a link in the description for a reading of a text by Apuleius, wherein he speaks of the hierarchy of intermediate natures that carry the rays of superior natures downwards into their lower manifestations. Having seen the other videos in my Metaphysics series, the deeper meaning of Apuleius' references to fire and air, the terrestrial and the celestial, may become more clear. How then, if the Henads are co-substantial, can there be divine hierarchies? And how can we say that one god is the parent of another? Both of these can be answered in terms of the Serai and their modes at different levels of reality. Different Serai illuminate different places, times, peoples, objects, and situations, and they are ordered by their revealed power. In Egypt, Ra, Osiris, and Horus are three generations of ruling gods, all of whom have perfect co-eternal sovereignty. Among Germanic peoples, Odin and Yngvi are both called Lord, and both are shown to sit on the throne at the summit of the universe. Jove and Sol Invictus were both simultaneously considered supreme by the Romans. This is not such a strange notion when you consider that the same is true among mortals. In Normandy, Richard I was a duke, but in England he was a king. As for divine parentage, the symbolism of marriage or intercourse between deities represents an interaction between the processions of two Serai, which create the conditions necessary for the manifestation of another Seira in increased fullness. The preceding essences of Jove and Latona intermingling generates a sort of passage through which the preceding essences of Apollo and Diana are brought into incarnation. To return to the question of mortal interaction, when the Theurgist perceives a divine visitation, when the oracle or poet is possessed by inspiration, when the shaman spirit rides to the summit of the world tree, when the voodoo priest's body is ridden by the lower, they have all remotely received phasmata, or an intermediary daimonic herald such as Cupid, and so it is not improper to say that they have received the deity.
Some of the most ancient Egyptian rituals where they believe they are possessed by entities.
And now we possess the philosophical perspective on the nature of divinity and how particulars come into existence. I will leave you with the words of Emperor Marcus Aurelius. To them that ask thee, where hast thou seen the gods? Or how knowest thou certainly that there be gods, that thou art so devout in their worship? I answer first of all, that even to the very eye they are in some manner visible and apparent. Secondly, neither have I ever seen my own soul, and yet I respect and honour it. So then for the gods, by the daily experience that I have of their power and providence towards myself and others, I know certainly that they are, and therefore I worship them. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.
Well, Chin Chin, do carry on with your mud pie.